Hello, good morning, and welcome to Logistics Managers webinar with Lucas Systems. I'm Caroline Peachy, the editor of Logistics Manager, and I'm your host for today's session, which is titled Supercharge or WMS, Unlock the Dynamic Capabilities You Actually Want. Replacing or upgrading warehouse management systems can be disruptive and time-consuming for operators, but that's not the only path to next-level performance. Today, we'll be learning how modern work execution and optimization systems can fill in the blanks of your existing WMS, bringing real-time visibility to your warehouse operations. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Bill Eardley, Senior Director, Solutions Consulting and Project Management at Lucas Systems. Over the course of the webinar, he will discuss how you can revitalize your WMS, boost productivity, and deliver a measurable return on investment without the pain of a full system replacement. So at this point, I'd like to encourage all our viewers to ask questions throughout the presentation via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please remember to submit your name and job title when doing so. We can take questions at the end of the webinar. I'll pose as many as possible to Bill in the time available. Also, a reminder there'll be a recording of this webinar made available on demand via logisticsmanager.com. So make sure to look out for that and you can share with colleagues. But with that now, I'd like to hand over to Bill to start the presentation section of this webinar.
Thank you, Caroline. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you're at. Early morning for some people, my friends in the States. So today what we're going to go through is talk about, supercharging your warehouse, talking about, a lot of the things that make warehouse execution systems unique, comparing them to WMS, and really talking about how it can be an extension of your WMS that supercharges it rather than, doing the typical rip and replace type of thing. So it's something that we at Lucas are very much experienced in. And we've got years of innovation experience. As you can see here, 27 plus years of innovation around AI, around work execution within the warehouse. We are pioneers in some of the AI-driven dynamic warehousing optimization software. So we're a leader in that perspective. It's not something new to Lucas. It's something we've been doing for many years, is finding the most intelligent way to operate within the warehouse. Our customers are operating our solutions in over 400 warehouses globally. And as I mentioned before, we're really experts in warehouse execution, warehouse operations, bringing decades of experience implementing warehouse execution, voice guided and directed technologies, warehouse management type systems. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, talking about some of the myths of a warehouse management system around flexibility and configurability. I myself have implemented dozens of warehouse management systems, tier 1, tier 2 type systems, and really know intimately about what it takes to make those systems, get them up and working. And what are some of the limitations around those systems? And how a warehouse execution system could be used with your warehouse management system to extend or enhance its capabilities. So there's going to be a lot of things I talk about today that are potentially allowing our customers to make their system smarter and more dynamic, provide a level of modernization to their systems that they maybe don't have today, either with their legacy WMS or even some of the tier 1 WMSs that they are implementing. Also, we will look at learning practical, low disruptive steps to integrating your warehouse execution system with your WMS. So the idea is we don't want to make these things overly complex or expensive to implement, and how we can very easily make them seamlessly integrate with your existing solutions that you have today. So what are some of the things that your WMS today won't do without you spending a lot of money and time and possibly introducing a lot of risk into your operations? or into your existing WMS system. So, some of the things they won't tell you, reducing picking errors more than 60% and improving order accuracy to almost 100%. Reducing your picking hours to 25% and increase throughput of 40%, and driving 35% overall efficiency gains and reducing your labor by 10%. Well, why is your WMS not, boasting about these types of statistics? Well, the reason is there's limitations to your existing WMS, right? So the traditional WMS is going to have a very kind of rigid workflow. Well, what does that mean? Every system does some level of warehouse mapping where you're defining locations, maybe zones around those locations. The locations have their dimensionals, maybe XYZ coordinates, travel sequences for both put away, picking, and other types of activities that you do within the warehouse. Well, when you do that type of setup, it often leads to a very rigid type of serpentine type path, travel path, or a very rigid set of prioritizations. Those systems also will use very simple batching rules, typically around FIFO or FIFO if you're using expiration dating to control your inventory, and a lot of location overlap. And when you do this, what happens is that creates inefficiencies and reduces the amount of travel optimization. There's also a static set of resource allocations that often can't really respond very well to the disruptions that happen in the warehouse. So we really know, as we've gone through, the disruptions in the supply chain, right, are big, and it's big in the news. But disruptions within your own warehouse can happen often with rush orders, emergency orders, resource allocations, resources being unavailable for a particular day or a shift. And how do you deal with those types of factors that come in? Also, the high cost and long timelines for changes to your WMS, right? Changing a WMS, particularly as we move into more of a model where companies are moving more to a cloud or a SaaS type solution, they want control over the system. They want to limit the amount of changes, which can often lead to very costly and expensive if you, as an organization, your business requirements mean that you need to make changes to a system to make your system and your processes more in sync. Then that can often, very much lead to changes that require a lot of money and time to implement. So at Lucas, we have this concept around the dynamic warehouse. So what does that mean? So really what that means is looking at static operations and being able to leverage smart software, make real-time data decisions, and take all of the information that you have within a system and be able to adapt and make real-time decision making using technology. Intelligent systems. So what that leads to is where we're finding solutions around intelligent systems to implement, flexibility around automation. So introducing automation into your warehouse if you don't already have that, providing better tools for workforce planning and execution, and providing real-time data visibility to the users through a number of dashboards or canvases or real-time notifications. But it's really all about what we're doing is very much driven by the data that you are generating on a daily basis via your systems with your operations. So some of the areas that we're going to focus on today, if we look at how we are positioned within Lucas, a lot of this has to do around intelligent batching. So what's a better way to take orders, to take containers or cartons or totes that we have to pick and put them together to most efficiently be able to pick or to execute work by batching work together. Also, path optimization, looking at the total warehouse, not having that rigid location sequencing, if you will, and finding new ways to move within the warehouse using digital maps of the warehouse and data, historical data. Dynamic slotting. So this is a way of looking at where you have product slotted, looking at historical trends, looking at forecasts, taking all of that data and dynamically changing where your product is located, say within a pick area or zone. So changing the slotting of that product, but doing it more of a very incremental, smart fashion, where it's not just moving all of the product out, reslotting, and move the product back in. So making incremental daily slotting swaps, as we like to call them, that will better, be utilized and give you greater efficiencies and not create a lot of work to be able to reslot your warehouse. Optimize pallet building, building a better pallet. We'll talk about that. A lot of it is tribal knowledge on how to build a pallet, or it's based on visual cues. How can we systematically do a better job? And then also dynamic prioritization. So knowing all of the work that we have that comes into the work queue, what's the best way for your business, given certain criteria, to determine how we want to prioritize and how we want to select work for the users within the warehouse. So starting with work optimization, right? So at Lucas, we have developed over many years algorithms that uniquely look at your company, your business requirements, your customers' requirements, and looking at, around things, say, based on an order or item or location and travel distance, your warehouse map, looking at different product attributes, and taking all of those factors and coming up with an optimum way to select what is the best work that someone should be working on. We utilize our Jennifer mobile tech, which is our voice-directed task execution, to intelligently and dynamically optimize the work that a worker receives. So we're basically looking at the historical data, things that they're completing, and we're continuing to learn. The system is continuing to learn and to make better optimized batches and be able to do best matching when it comes to groupings of work. Pick path optimization. So, we have a customer, AWG. They were facing a situation where they needed to update their voice system. They went with us for a number of reasons. Obviously, our voice-directed system, Jennifer, very much a leader in the market, was one of the reasons they went with it. But also, what they could get using our pick path optimization, where we could optimize their work and reduce travel. So some of the results that they saw was an 8% productivity gain in terms of just task execution. They saw an 18% travel time reduction. And for them, they calculated that saved them about $5 million annually. So significant savings just looking at reducing traveling and doing more intelligent batching with their system. So I mentioned intelligent batching. Another one of our customers is Silmid. They were able to use our batching. And basically, the problem that they faced was they had a heavy backlog and excessive overtime, right? So they were having to up their labor to be able to meet the demands that they had for their business. And they needed, obviously, improvements within their warehouse and across their supply chain. So using our voice solution and using our intelligent batching, they were able to structure and provide. We were able to provide a solution which provided multimodal picking, where you have a combination of display and voice utilization to execute tasks. You had order prioritization and intelligent batching of work. We optimized pick paths, and we provided to them real-time visibility dashboards, right? So our management console gives a lot of productivity views and ways to look at your workload and what the work queues are to be able to much better manage the labor within your warehouse. So the results that they were able to receive was a 99.9% picking accuracy, 35% efficiency increase overall, and 60% throughput improvement. So significant gains just by doing a better job of organizing their work and how the users were executing it, reducing the amount of travel path, grouping work with like types of items or profiles together to see really the benefits that they were able to gain. Dynamic slotting. So with dynamic slotting, we have, as I mentioned before, a different approach to slotting where we're using AI and machine learning technologies. So with these techniques, we're able to, the traditional slotting systems will use engineering standards, oftentimes very complex, to be able to reslot. And what we did was we basically tried to negate some of these very specialized engineering that's required, time-consuming exercises of gathering data, oftentimes with spreadsheets, to be able to reslot. So we're able to take the data from your existing systems with very easy integration points or file uploads, and we're able to then take that and come up with recommendations to make swaps, as I mentioned before, where you can reslot products to find better locations based on historical data and based on the some of the forecasting and seasonality or item attributes that might be associated with the items that you have within your pick locations and pick zones. So next we have a short video talking about our dynamic slotting.
Slotting analysis has long been a complex task, requiring expensive studies, specialized resources, and requiring considerable time. Lucas Systems has transformed slotting with the introduction of intelligent swaps. With just one click, our AI-based dynamic slotting tool generates the best slotting recommendations in real time. These recommendations can be made at will and allow you to reslot as frequently as possible. The more you reslot, the quicker you will see your ROI. The future of slotting is here, driving dramatic improvements in your warehouse operations. Slotting analysis.
So some of the challenges around traditional slotting, right? And we've already talked a little bit about this, where it's often difficult to manage. There's a lot of potential manual data collection, doing a lot with spreadsheets. A lot of times it could be very expensive because you might have more of a solution that is much more an engineered type solution, requiring a lot of perhaps industrial engineers, a lot of data points, or a lot of standard calculations and coming up with standards around travel, around some of the metrics that are needed to make those slotting tools work. And oftentimes it doesn't really produce the ROI that a company is looking for to get out of a system that can tell them where to slot their products most efficiently. So our dynamic slotting, it's focused really on being very easy to use, making swap recommendations on demand, and you have the ability to accept or reject those. And based on whether you accept or reject those, the system will continue to learn over time and also continue to collect historical data to be able to make better recommendations continually to the user. It's much more affordable in that you can make your swaps in the downtime during the day, or build it into your overall warehouse processes when you want to make these swaps. And it can be much more incremental. You don't have to do a huge or a very big reslotting process, which can often take days to be able to accomplish. So the idea is if you do things more incrementally over time, that you will get a better set of recommendations, reduce the amount of labor required for reslotting, and then we'll also give you a much better ROI. So we're looking at the frequency that our customers can use this. It gives a better seasonality fit, those types of things. And again, we can fit it much more into their day-to-day processes rather than some of the traditional ways of reslotting the warehouse. Some of the other benefits of dynamic slotting, it can reduce the amount of picking and replenishment costs. So, finding better slots for locations or for products to locations, maybe moving to larger locations to reduce the amount of replenishments where you can hold more inventory, to allow you to do even improve the batching of picks because of the quantities within an inventory might be increased and allow you more opportunity to pick more at one time. Improve space utilization. So moving products into, as I mentioned, appropriate size slots based on product demand, the amount of picks and the amount of replenishments that are happening. And also enhance safety and ergonomics, right? So moving products that more frequently picked into what we term as golden zones, where it's much easier, much more accessible to get to, maybe requires less stress in terms of reaching or bending over to pick product. So finding that optimal set of locations to move into a zone, the golden zone, and slotting the appropriate products there can help reduce on a number of those things. Our next topic for really the modernization of a dynamic warehouse is around pallet optimization. This is one area that often gets overlooked. As we look at pallet building, it's very much that there is a kind of tribal knowledge around pallet building, even as pickers are going through, knowing also having the visibility to know what you're building onto the pallet, how much you're building, in what order it's coming from a sequencing standpoint. So our system is using algorithms to basically try to take some of that tribal knowledge or take so much of the guessing out of it for the users and really give them a much better plan around how we're going to sequence the work to much better and efficiently build a pallet to ship to the customer. These pallets can be tailored and match around each customer's unique processes, their rules, workflows. So this is, again, how we pick, where we're picking from, the sequencing goes a lot into it. So there's a balance of building the pallet and how you sequence and how you build the pallet and in what order we want to pick, right? So you could lose some picking efficiencies, but in the end, you actually build a much better pallet. And so these are some of the things we're looking at. And we also do, if you couple this with some of the other things we do, like I'll talk about best pallet match, where you can not only build more efficient pallets, but you could also be potentially picking and building multiple pallets at the same time if you have access to, say, a double pallet jack or some other types of equipment. This can also seamlessly integrate with your existing systems, right? So having the intelligence around pallet building and how you use that within your business process flows and the existing systems you have is something that we can work with you with on, to how to plan out that particular set of work. Smarter pallets, faster fulfillment, greater efficiency, right? So looking at some of the things around what are the core challenges, right? So why do people build bad pallets? And why does it potentially end up costing them so much? So a lot of times coming down to it has to do with prioritization of urgent orders. So sometimes things get prioritized or you've got certain customers or orders that always take priority. And that means that oftentimes how they get picked and when they get picked can impact how you end up building your pallets overall. Sometimes the sequencing of the picks and the priority placed on how you pick it will actually supersede how you end up building your pallet. And some of the other things that factor into how we build a pallet, right? Like the weight, the fragility, and the stackability of products, right? These are all product attributes that oftentimes don't get focused on when you're building a pallet. They're very critical criteria that needs to be looked at. It needs to go into the overall calculation as to how you're going to better, build your pallets. Looking at what are bad pallets costing you, up to 11% of loads arriving at a distribution center show damage, and the average is about 2%. So not only is it gaining efficiencies, but it's also building a better pallet to perhaps reduce the amount of damage that can occur on that pallet. These are all things that we need to take a look at when deciding how is the best way to set up a solution to build pallets. So why would you want to use our dynamic pallet builder? Here's some of the reasons, right? Cost savings, safety, we talked about, reduction of damage. So, if I build a better pallet, It's structurally more sound, taking into all the factors of building the pallet, perhaps reducing the damage that occurs to the pallet when looking at what are the best items to use as base, looking at fragility, stackability of product, those types of things. Also, productivity gains. What's the best way for us to not only build the pallet, but also sequence the picks? Say if you're doing case pick the pallet type of thing, or you're doing case pick the belt and it's getting sorted, and now it's coming down a divert line and it needs to be built to a pallet. So sequencing and structuring things in a way to be able to gain better productivity on how I can more efficiently build my pallets. Also, flexibility. So one of our customers that we have is Veritable Vegetable, and they, using our dynamic pallet building, we're really able to see significant reductions in errors. So, when you look at a company that is building pallets in cases that are items, you're talking about produce, you're talking about things that often have a crushability to them. They can very easily be damaged. So be able to build a better pallet to reduce the damages, but also just using our system, they were also able to reduce the errors. So they were more accurate in their picking using the Lucas system and using Jennifer. So they were not only building better pallets, but they were building more accurate pallets. So they saw a number of gains across the board by using various components of our dynamic warehouse solution. Also, we have a concept of best pallet match. So this technology that we utilize in Lucas kind of fits in with our batching, our dynamic work optimization, some of the other things we do. But the idea here is if you can pick multiple pallets at the same time, saying using a double pallet jack or a forklift where you can pick up multiple pallets at the same time, we're able to optimize and determine what is the best pallets for you to match up to minimize the amount of travel and labor that's required to pick and deliver those pallets to the next stage within your process, whether that's a consolidate stage or ship stage location. It also allows you and gives you the ability to support picking from multiple stores at once without losing accuracy. So you don't necessarily always have to pick things by order or by specific customer. You could actually have multiple customers or multiple stores where we pick at the same time, and as we, best pallet match on the pick, and then we can direct you to the proper staging locations or drop locations. So it gives you a greater level of configurability and adaptability that you can introduce into your system, when it comes to more full pallet picking or partial pallet picking that you might be doing within your warehouse. So how does it work? So deliver the best match. So assigns the smartest pallet combination for each picker. So we look at what we call the seed order or the seed pallet. We pick the best pallet in terms of prioritization, and then the system will then look at real time to determine what is the next best pallet to pick based on a number of criteria. And a lot of that has to do with the equipment that you're using and also the, from a travel path perspective, what is the next closest piece of work or full pallet for you to pick. So again, this takes into account and utilizes real-time decision-making of the system. As you can see there are one of our customers, AWG. We have a quote from Richard. Basically, they saw using best pallet match. This is one of where they saw significant gains. So, due to their diverse size of their stores, how they group their orders, they used our best pallet match to increase their productivity and really reduce the amount of travel time required. So accuracy without compromise. What does this mean? So looking at, a lot of our customers, particularly in the food distribution, grocery space, they're often shipping to stores. This allows them to do multi-store picking with the same amount of accuracy. Using our voice-directed workflows, we ensure that each pick is verified and confirmed. Accuracy remains equal to the traditional, single store picking method. And obviously, as they're validating accurately, it reduces the cost of mispicks and reworks in the line. So the idea here is to reduce the amount of travel, get significant savings there using our batching optimization. You see significant gains in travel path, and they, as we mentioned before, for AWG, they saw an amount of $5 million in annual savings by using these techniques within our solution. And again, we talked about veritable vegetable. We provided to them a highly flexible system, somewhat customized for their uniqueness of their business, and also the challenge of integrating with a legacy WMS solution. They're using the voice-directed pick optimization and our dynamic palette builder, and they were able to see a 40% reduction in their errors, so much better accuracy. And then also prior to this, they were doing paper picking. So they're using our intelligent solutions, our voice technology, mobile tech to also reduce the amount of paper use that they had going on with order pick sheets being used within the warehouse. So, kind of in summary, starting to look back, why would you want to choose a warehouse execution system over, say, replacing your WMS? For a WES or the Lucas type solutions, it's much easier for us to implement, to deploy our solution with the technology we have today around integrations. It's much easier and much more configurable to be able to set up different types of communication methods, to identify transactions, to map out the data exchanges between the systems. Much easier than it used to be. It doesn't really require a lot of custom code, much more configurable. So from an intelligence standpoint, it's much more of a plug and play type of approach. It also provides a minimal amount of process disruption. We can model your warehouse executions, the workflows that you're executing, much more closely to your business operations. So looking at your business processes and being able to model and kind of fit to how you do things. Or perhaps provide better ways for you to do things than maybe you previously had known. Also, faster deployment. Typically, implementing a new WMS is a bigger lift because there's a lot more components that go on within a WMS. So if you have an existing WMS, but maybe it doesn't meet your needs, it's much easier for us to integrate a WES type solution with your WMS, extend its capabilities, integrate with it seamlessly, provides you a much higher ROI than, say, ripping out and putting in a whole new WMS. And for a lot of our customers, they really like what their WMS provides to them. It's just that it might be a little bit dated technology and doesn't provide everything they need. So instead of having to go back and put in a whole new WMS, where perhaps you might lose some of the things that have been built up over years, by adding a warehouse execution system, we can just much more easily extend the capabilities and modernize the capabilities of your system versus, perhaps having to relearn a whole new set of functionality that a new WMS would bring. And, our message really is that for a lot of our customers and potential customers is you don't need a new WMS. With an approach to a more dynamic warehouse, implementing a warehouse execution system, we can bring in things like intelligent decision making with our work optimization, doing real-time optimization, give you flexibility around how you want to execute your workflows, some of the screens you want to do, systems you want to integrate with. We can do it much more easily and much at a better price, perhaps, than if you implemented a whole new warehouse management system. Not only that, but if you implement a warehouse execution system, the users get trained and they learn how that works. What happens is in the future, if you do need to change your WMS or those underlying systems, you don't really need to, from a training perspective. The user now knows how that system works, the execution system. For them, really nothing changes. And what does change is perhaps the integrations and some of the things we do behind the scenes, but the user experience pretty much can remain intact. So that really gives them not only a more modern system, if you're looking at implementing this with your legacy WMS, but it gives them smarter tools and greater senses of visibility that they have to manage the work within their warehouse. But down the road, it also allows you much easier to then, if you do need to make a switch to a WMS, you can keep your WES in place. And some of the features and functionalities you're looking then for your WMS might change, or the list is not as extensive because you have a strong WES that you've already implemented that your users like. They feel more empowered with to be able to execute the work and complete tasks within the warehouse. So that completes the information that I had to talk about today. Open it up to questions if anyone has any.
Fantastic. First of all, Bill, thank you very much for that excellent presentation. There were some great case studies in there. So I can see that we've already getting some questions through, but just a reminder, you can still submit your questions and we'll try to get through as many as possible. I'm going to start with a broad question first, and then we'll move on to some more specific ones. So the first question we've got, how can a distribution center evaluate or model the expected cost reductions that this solution can deliver?
Yeah, so at Lucas, we do a number of things where we work with customers. We can do actually simulations. We can do ROI analysis. So oftentimes, if you have an existing system that you're using to execute your work, we can get a data set from you, and we can use that to model and then do a comparison and show you, perhaps by using our Jennifer voice-directed technology, and using some of the optimization that you get there. And then also adding in, say, our dynamic work optimization, palette building, where we can model and show you kind of your current state and then what the future state would look like if you were using, say, our solutions and the significance that you might gain. So there is a lot of an ROI analysis, kind of data analytics that can happen, and things that we can do, tools that we have within our bag, if you will, that allows us to then be able to help you calculate and say, build that ROI story, or build out the story to show you what kind of benefits you're going to gain by using all of the things we talked about that make up the dynamic warehouse.
Fantastic. Okay, the next question we're going to take is from Mark, who's got a couple of questions about the solution. Number one is, does this integrate with Sage 200? And then secondly, do you have to use Jennifer with this solution?
Yep. Mark, thank you for the questions. Yeah, so I'm not familiar with Sage 200, but what I will say is that at Lucas, we have a standard integration layer we call EAI. So as I had mentioned before, the idea is that we would work with your team or with IT. If there are specs for the Sage 200 system, maybe they already have existing integrations, APIs that we can work with. So really what it becomes then is it's an integration mapping session where we can configure the system to match those integrations, configure the communication methods and protocols that need to be between the systems. So it's much easier to implement, those types of systems. So again, like I said, we integrate with a lot of tier one systems, but we also integrate with a lot of legacy type systems, very dated systems, AS400s, whatever it might be. And it's very easy for us to integrate with those types of systems. In terms of Jennifer, Jennifer is our execution software. It is voice directed. You can use it in multimodal mode. It is recommended that you use that with some of the dynamic work optimization things we're doing. But that's more so, I would say, around the execution of tasks and some of the things we can do with batching and whatnot there. But we have customers where we're doing dynamic slotting, perhaps the palletization, those types of things where it can be done separately. It doesn't have to be done through Jennifer, through the work execution and voice-directed software that we have.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully that answers your question. We've got another question that's come in from Matteo. he's asked, what are the prerequisites for introducing pallet optimization? Can it handle pallet construction with loose pieces as well as cartons?
Yeah, so I think in terms of palette optimization, palette building, there's a number of factors that go into it, right? So we talked about product attributes, item attributes, crushability. You can even think about velocity. You can think about weight constraints, those types of things. Where the product is located within the warehouse, what makes the most sense from a pick pack optimization standpoint. Also, too, we can use a number of kind of traditional things, with cubing of the pallet, the size of the pallet, restrictions you might have on height, those types of things to determine what's the best way to then construct the pallet. And sometimes it's also building multiple pallets, right? If an order is large enough, or you've got a multiple of orders that you're going to consolidate together, those can also be things that will be factors in determining what's the best way to build pallets or how many pallets I'm actually going to build. Your question around loose pieces, if you're picking loose pieces to say a carton, whether it's corrugated or perhaps a tote, those are things that yes, we can utilize into taking the carton or the tote and then making that part of the calculation to build onto the pallet. So pallet building, and let's say you're using more sortation or you're doing order consolidation, those types of things, perhaps it's a matter of where a percentage of your pallet are full cases and another percentage are cartons or loose pieces that were picked, say, to a corrugated box or tote. And yes, we can very much factor those in making a determination of should they be part of a pallet that we have determined to be built.
Thank you for that question, Matteo, who is from an Italian beauty products company. We have a question next about integration. When integrating the platform with the existing WMS or ERP, is it the process typically like heavy, complex, or is it quite straightforward? Can you share a bit more perhaps about some of the integration points you mentioned in your presentation?
Sure. Yeah, I touched a little bit on that, in terms of the integrations themselves. Really, like I said, it becomes a matter of what is the preferred communication method, whether it's secure FTP. We do that with a number of customers, especially with older systems. A lot of the newer systems are using RESTful APIs, more web service type of things where you've got modern payloads and data structures with XML, JSON, those types of things. But we have some customers that are doing, common delimited. They're doing, flat file, fixed, length type of strings and those types of things. We have customers that are doing socket communications because they need things more real time, or the integration might be with more automation type systems that require that faster response and more of a synchronous type of communication versus asynchronous. So we have a lot of flexibility there. Most of it is, again, configuration. But as you start to get in, where I think the complexity gets in is probably more the number of transactions. So if you're just having us, say, do pick path optimizations or using our tools for picking, those are pretty simple in terms of getting pick work. We do our thing and then we confirm back the picks that are completed. But if you start adding in things like put away and replenishment, loading, these are all things that we can do within the dynamic warehouse. Now it's more so the complexity grows just because you've got more transactions going between the systems, between the WMS and, say, the WES system, but definitely all manageable.
Brilliant. We've got time probably to take a couple more questions. Just a reminder, you can submit your question, and if any that we don't get through, we can pass on and answer after the webinar. Next question is a broad one. As we look to the future, what are the key influences or trends that will drive how these technologies and systems evolve?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing it. I think that for me, I believe the warehouse of the future is a combination of humans working alongside automations and robotics, right? So we already have the tools in place with our work optimization, and visibility, where we can do a higher level of orchestration between workers in the warehouse. And the workers of the future are not just humans using, say, our mobile tech, our Jennifer, or using some other type of device. The warehouse of the future is going to be having robotics potentially in the same space, or having advanced automation systems, and figuring out a way to have visibility and orchestration across the warehouse. So to be able to orchestrate that, you need to have a certain level of intelligence, and it needs to have that dynamic type of atmosphere where you can very easily make decisions on the fly. A system can, to make sure that not only are workers and devices and automations being most efficient, but also doing it very much in a way that is safe. So safety is also a component, I think. So looking at the technologies we talked about today, the warehouse of the future, being able to adapt easily to disruptions, but also I think that higher level of automation and robotics that was already being introduced into the warehouse, and that trend is only going to continue, especially as labor is much more of a concern as we move forward. Labor costs, just the size of the labor workforce, those types of things. I think those are all factors that we need to keep in mind.
Thanks, Bill. Sort of follow-on question to this then. We mentioned workforce there. In what ways does this type of solution enhance like the employee engagement or make task coordination more easier for the frontline workers?
Yeah, I think that what we've seen is using these technologies, the ramp up time for training new workers, and getting them much more acclimated to the processes and understanding it, and really making an impact much faster. I think the learning curve is reduced with introducing these types of technologies, letting the systems make the decisions, letting the decision determine what's the best way to execute the work, being much more optimized and kind of orchestrating it in that fashion. So I think that reducing the learning curve is one way, and the benefits we're seeing right away, reduced amount of training. But also I think that the workers themselves will see that they're much more efficient, and sometimes having that more modern user interface, whether it's a voice directed solution, multimodal solution, an enhanced level of visibility with dashboards and whatnot that you can implement within your warehouse. I think all of those types of things make an impact on the user and the worker experience, right? You can add in even more labor productivity things. We have a tool we call Speedometer, which can give you real-time updates as to how you're performing as you're executing work, maybe against your peers or against a certain standard that's been established by your company, by your leaders. So there's a number of ways that these technologies have made a real impact on the worker within the warehouse, and how they do their work, and how they're feeling overall with the system, and how it's assisting them in accomplishing their work.
Thank you. We'll just take one final question. This one, what types of operational or inventory data are required to implement this intelligent batching and dynamic slotting solutions that you mentioned?
Yeah, so for us, we take the approach of, we want a kind of a map of the warehouse, or what we do is we actually will look at a digital map of the warehouse, and we'll plot out what that warehouse looks like in our system, taking into account obviously location data, but also taking into account things about how you want to travel with an aisle. So travel path, sequencing is one thing, but allowing to determine, do you have one-way aisles? Do you allow cut-throughs? Like, what are some of the things that traditional systems don't allow you to input into a system? Like, we actually allow you to define that in our system, that can then be implemented to give a greater sense of optimization. And where we're looking in the future too is gathering more definitive data sets, more detailed data sets to give us better data, say on location intelligence, how users are working and moving throughout the warehouse, to then take that data, larger data sets, and be able to use our optimization algorithms, our machine learning and AI to then make better decisions and better recommendations on how users should execute the work. So data, we all know from a trending standpoint, data is king. It is the key to drive everything that we're going to do and everything we're doing in the future. So the bigger and richer your data sets, the more detail you have, the better decisions our solutions are going to be able to make to improve the overall experience, improve labor productivity, reduce travel path, and really reduce overall, labor costs.
Great. Well, that's a good place to wrap it up. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. But I'd like to thank Bill Erdley, the Senior Director, Solutions Consulting at Project Management at Lucas Systems, for joining us today, and to Lucas Systems for sponsoring today's webinar. Just a reminder, the webinar will be available to view on demand on logisticsmanager.com in case you want to refer back or share it with a colleague. But finally, now, on behalf of Logistics Manager and Lucas Systems, thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you for our next webinar. Goodbye.